God knows when you need just a little nudge so that you can keep moving forward in your journey. And that for us has been the story every step of the way. I had a whole bunch of questions about my future, what I was going to do after I graduated from Oklahoma State. I actually had just gone to a conference at Falls Creek, and the youth minister said, "Have you ever prayed all day before?" I remember I said, "I've never actually just given the whole day to God." I took the day off on a Saturday, and I planned from the moment I woke up in the morning to spend time with God so that it would finish with me kneeling at the foot of my bed, which was a futon couch at that point, and asking God my question, "Lord, what would you have me do? I'll do whatever you want me to do." All of a sudden, I have this crazy vision, and it culminates with an old man who looks like me with a white beard next to a young man who looks like me in a green shirt in the Capitol Rotunda. And I'd never even been to Washington, D.C. before. I didn't know what that meant. I'm back at the foot of my futon, and I freak out. And I was like, what in the world just happened? And that was why I reached out to my dad, because I trusted him, and I knew that he would give me guidance in what I should do with this thing.
We're seeing people come to Christ right now in great numbers, because when things get tough, people start listening and people are open to change.
My dad served as an evangelist for 22 years, traveled all over the place. In fact, I believe there's 7 or 8 different times that he preached at Falls Creek over the years. Just was my favorite preacher in the entire world, my hero of heroes. I called my father, said, "Dad, this happened. What does it mean?" His exact words were, "Time will tell if this is a vision from God or bad pizza." And he said, "Look, write everything down." And so I did. I wrote everything down. Old man, white beard, young man, green shirt. God was setting something up, but it wasn't meant to be fully understood at that point. He was planting seeds in my heart that he was beginning to cultivate. My pastor asked me, "Where would you like to take the kids on mission trip?" My wife looked at me and she goes, "You had that crazy vision." She goes, "You haven't even been to Washington." She said, "Let's start looking at mission opportunities there." After spending a week there, our eyes went from looking up at the monuments to all of a sudden we were looking down and seeing the people that live in the shadow of those monuments. There was poverty like I'd never experienced before, homelessness, people living on the street, and there were no churches of any denomination of any kind in that area. My wife and I began to talk about it, that maybe God had called us to plant the church. Dad calls me right before we're about to plant the church and says that the Lord is calling him off the road and to take a pastorate. He'd had offers over the years, but this was the very first time that he'd had any inkling that he was going to go and do that. Dad gets the job as the pastor of our church at that point.
Hello, Victory Life. My name is Zack Randles.
He said, "You've been here the longest of any other staff member. I need you to stay an extra 6 months, and then we can make sure that the church will be on firm footing." I got mad. I thought he was just trying to talk me out of planting, and talked with my wife privately, and I was like, "This is dumb. He just doesn't want us to go. We're back to square one." And she goes, "I didn't hear that." She said, "I think you should pray about it too." Well, of course, when I took time to pray about it, the Spirit had told me that that's what we were supposed to do. That 6 months would be the fulfillment of a desire in my heart that I had had since I was a little boy, that my dad and I could work side by side. That night, all of a sudden, my dad's stomach swelled up like a basketball under his shirt, and we thought it was his appendix. He was in such pain, and I remember we're up at the hospital and just praying that this isn't the sign that we're supposed to stay back. We load up, we drive to D.C., and we said goodbye to my dad from his hospital bed. As we're driving, everything is just so exciting, but we are scared to death at the same time. About 3 weeks later, I've got a youth camp to preach. My phone buzzes while I'm in the rent car, and it was my dad And that was the day we found out what we thought was appendicitis was neuroendocrine stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Dad had a 3.2% chance of living more than 6 months. You just get numb. You just get numb. The craziest thing happened. It worked. The chemo was pushing the cancer back. Dad's fighting his cancer. We're seeing people come to Christ. And then on launch day, we had 84 local residents that showed up for launch day that we'd never even met before. And they show up at our little church plant that was meeting on the second floor of the Courtyard Marriott Hotel.
Our God is so awesome and so powerful.
We have 2 members of Congress that are members of our church, and one of the members came up and said, we want to bring your dad up here and have him pray before Congress. And I remember I called my dad and I said, let's get this book, let's set you up, and then you can preach a revival at our church. A week before the revival, my dad calls me, and I remember Dad saying, he said, son, he goes, I want you to know yesterday, he said, I had the best day, but I got a call that the cancer's back, it's everywhere. And he said, they've given me 30 days to live again. And he said, this time, he said, I think this is the end. I go, well, we'll cancel the revival, we'll cancel the Capitol, we'll get back home to you. And my dad fires back and says, like heck you will. He said, I'm coming to preach. It was nuts. My dad had always had a gray beard, and all of a sudden off the plane, the chemo had his beards come back stark white. The day that Dad was to pray at the Capitol was St. Patrick's Day, and so I'm wearing a green shirt in honor of St. Patrick's Day. I didn't want people to pinch me.
The house will be in order. The prayer will be offered by the guest chaplain, Reverend Zack Randles.
Holy and Most High God, we come before you, grateful for your gift of life.
And when Dad finishes praying, there's a staffer there to push my dad's wheelchair.
Amen.
A member of Congress waves off the staffers and pushes my dad's wheelchair to the Capitol Rotunda. It was just so crazy. The vision that I had had when I was 21 years old at the foot of my futon in Stillwater, Oklahoma, had come together in that instant. And Dad looks up at me and he says, you saw this. He said, you told us about this years ago. When I was 21 years old and telling God, I'll do whatever you want me to do, if I had known that this was the death of my father, if I had known that, then I don't know if I would have had the courage at that point to walk the path. God knew that. God gave me not just 6 months working side by side with my dad. He gave me almost to the day the best 6 months that my dad had. The journey was about getting a church started. It was about my father. It was about, again, me growing and becoming a better man. But the ultimate purpose of the church planting journey was that I could know God the same way that He knows me. He knew me better than I knew myself. He understands things that we don't even understand ourselves. A lot of the conversations I used to have with my earthly father, I now have been able to have with my heavenly Father.